Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? It sounds not very loud. Good morning. Welcome to the second day. It's fantastic to see all of you here. Dear members of the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very interesting day when we will reflect Europe, what now? The summit marks the first gathering of our political members following the recent European Union elections, and today we have a unique opportunity to address the pressing challenges facing our local and regional governments and to set a visionary course for our collective future. As we come together, we stand at a pivotal moment for Europe. Our discussions today will delve into themes critical to Europe's future. We have the opportunity to shape how local and regional authorities contribute to the broader European agenda. We will explore strategies to ensure that our governments can effectively support and enhance the lives of the citizens we serve. We will have two political panels today. The first panel, organized together with Platforma members, will focus on the future of Europe. Following the results of the recent European Union elections, it is important to discuss the key issues such as the future of democracy in Europe, sustainable development, and the European Union enlargement process. This discussion is crucial for understanding how our local and regional governments can reinforce democratic practices, advance sustainability, and navigate the complexities of integrating new member states. It is through this dialogue that we can chart a path to a more democratic, inclusive, and more resilient Europe. The second panel will address the urban-rural divide and integrated territorial development, underscoring the importance of effective collaboration across different levels of government. We will discuss strategies for fostering cohesive regional growth, enhancing cooperation and partnership, and ensuring equitably resource distribution. And this conversation provides a platform for us to offer key recommendations to the European Union on the future of cohesion policy, emphasizing the need for balanced and fair development across all regions. By bringing together a diverse group of political leaders, experts and stakeholders, the CMAR Leaders Summit aims to forge a unified vision for Europe's local and regional governments. This collaborative approach will enable us to tackle pressing challenges such as economic and social disparities and climate change, while also capitalizing on opportunities for innovation and sustainable development. Let us make this summit a moment of reflection and action. It is our chance to empower local and regional governments to play a more proactive role in shaping Europe's future. Together, we can create a more equitable, sustainable, and prosperous Europe for all. I will now leave the floor to Shada Islam, political commentator and our moderator for today's first panel discussion. Thank you for being here today, and I wish us all a very fruitful exchange today. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President, and hello and welcome everyone to this very important panel discussion that I'm privileged to facilitate. The question is shaping the new mandate and the power and the priorities of local and regional entities. What can we do together for a prosperous future? This session is also being live streamed, so a warm welcome to all of you joining us online. And for those of you in the room here, there's interpretation. You can see it on the panel there in English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish. And the hashtag to use, because you're going to be active on social media, aren't you, is CMR Leader Summit and hashtag Future of Europe. So what we're going to do over the next hour or so is very simple. We're going to explore the results of the European elections and their implication for local agendas. We're going to discuss strategies to ensure that future EU priorities, such as enlargement, are aligned with our European values and our principles, and also make sure that local and regional governments, so all of us here, are treated as key players as we go forward. Let me introduce the wonderful panelists that are here with me on stage. First of all, Violeta Crudu. She is the mayor of Cruzesti municipality in the Republic of Moldova since July 2015. Ms. Crudu is also president of the Women's Network within the Congress of Local Authorities from the Republic of Moldova and also holds the position of CALM vice president. Welcome to our stage here. Also introducing Maria José García Pelao, who's the mayor of Jerez de la Frontera, and she's the president of the Spanish Federation of Municipalities and Provinces. Welcome here as well. Carola Gunnarsson, councillor of the municipality of Sala. She is the CMR spokesman on international affairs and UCLG vice president, so from Sweden. Carola, welcome here as well. Gun-Marit Helgesen, of course, needs no introductions. He's a member of Telemark County Council and president of the Norwegian Association of Local and Regional Authorities. Also on stage here with me is Dusan Rajcevic. He's the mayor of Bar from Montenegro, president of the Network of Associations of Local Authorities of Southeast Europe. And last but definitely not least, very well-known Klaus Weller, chairman of the Martin Center Academic Council now, but also, of course, former Secretary General of the European Parliament. So moving forward, before we start the panel, I've been asked by the organizers very nicely to set the scene for what we're going to be discussing, to give you some of my views as we move into this very interesting period, which is post-elections. So 1 week after these elections, I think we can all agree, sitting here, that we face a sobering, even for some of us, a troubling moment. Our values, we have seen over the last few weeks and months, are being challenged. And in many ways, our vision of an open, progressive, and inclusive Europe is, I think, in danger. Many of us are quite rightly very relieved that in the end, despite the forecasts, there was no far-right takeover of the European Union. But we also know, all of us here, that this is not the time for complacency. We are moving into uncharted political waters, and we are faced with something of a paradox. Far-right political parties, hard-right parties, have made significant gains in France, Germany, and in Italy, often at the expense of liberal and green parties. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has called snap elections that he hopes will clarify French politics following the success of the far-right Rassemblement National. But at the European level, at first glance at least, not much appears to have changed. The European People's Party will remain the biggest bloc in the EU Assembly, followed by the centre-left Socialists and Democrats, so not much change there. And this has prompted, as you know, reassuring comments that the centre is holding. But as we look at the centre is holding, let's not overlook some inconvenient and I would say uncomfortable realities. I see 4 important trends that I think should worry us. First, and we've seen this, across Europe there is growing support for populist, nationalist, and in some cases, Eurosceptic parties. In fact, many of these parties and many of their views on migration, for instance, on racism, climate change, but also enlargement and development aid are already being mainstreamed and normalized. Second, this rise of the extreme right is being enabled, amazingly, by a younger generation, some of whom are probably voting for the first time. I think we need to discuss this and question this and reflect on this in the days ahead. Third, the centre may be holding in the European Parliament, but the ECR and the ID group have boosted their presence in the Assembly. Germany's alternative for AfD, let's say it this way, will enter the Parliament for the first time with 15 seats. That means that 1 out of 4 deputies in the new Parliament will be from the hard right. As such, I think we should not confuse ourselves. Their influence on EU policy cannot be discounted. Fourth, we must keep a sharp eye on coalition building and the formation of groups in the European Parliament, and especially on the choices that are made by the new non-aligned members, newcomers. They will also influence policy. And fifth, much will, of course, depend on the next leadership of the EU institutions, the European Commission, the EU Council presidency, and the new Parliament president, as well as the next EU High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy. We've seen that last night a deal that was thought to be done has not really been finalized. So let's see interesting times ahead. Now, I believe that all of these developments will inevitably impact on our values and our policies in the coming years. They will also determine Europe's standing in the global south, in the world, and EU's relations with countries in our neighborhood. They will also, of course, impact on all of you, local authorities, and define your role in Europe. Here, I believe there is cause for optimism. I was speaking to Fabrizio just now, and I believe very much that at local authorities, regional authorities, there is a progressive move, and that cities, municipalities, regions are sometimes more inclusive than the national state level. So in our democratic Europe, what happens at the national level and the European level are important, of course, but what happens locally and in the regions is equally important. At times of political uncertainty at the national or European level, as we're seeing today, it will be even more imperative that local and regional governments are able to support and strengthen our democratic practices and our values. You must stand up for EU values and principles. And you must be treated, as I said earlier, as key players to create this more inclusive, sustainable, and also at the same time competitive Europe. I believe very much that as we move forward, we will have to remember and keep reminding some of our politicians that the EU was built on an inspiring promise of safeguarding democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And we will have to keep reminding our politicians of this loudly, clearly, and together. Thank you very much. So there I set the scene. Thank you very much. So having set the scene, let me now come back to the panel. We're going to kick off the panel by a Slido to get a sense of what all of you are feeling today about the main challenges facing us here in Europe. So please access the poll via the QR code that you see on your screens. And you should, if you can, also enter the following code, CMR Leaders, at, I think it'll coming up on your screens. It is www.slido.com. And you are being asked to answer two questions. First question, what are the main challenges of the EU for the next 5 years? That's the first question. And the second question, the first question. So please, I'll give you a minute to do that. And then the second question that you are being asked to answer is, what is the top priority for the European local authorities and regional governments in the next 5 years? That's the second question. So go ahead and do that, and we will reveal the results of this panel, of this Slido, in a few minutes. But first of all, let's start our panel. So I'm going to turn to you, Violeta Crudu, to give us, all of you, actually, all panelists, to give you your reaction to what I have said, but also mostly to the results of the European elections. What are your sentiments at the moment?
Good morning. Our prospects are very optimistic regarding the European elections. I would like to highlight the fact that a large number of Moldovans have also Romanian citizenship. They are around 1 million, therefore they could participate in the European elections. And Moldova gave a very good result. And the citizens were very active in the European parliamentary elections, which means that European hope is long awaited. Secondly, for Moldova, the European parliamentary elections were also a test for autumn referendum and the upcoming presidential elections that we will have in October. And we hope that a strong support of the enlargement process will be continued by the new EU leadership. Thank you.
Okay, so optimistic there.
Yes, very optimistic.
Looking forward, and that's very good news. So let's turn to you, María José.
Bueno, yo creo, en primer lugar, buenos días, moderadora, presidenta, secretario general, compañeros de debate, señoras, señores. Muchísimas gracias por habernos invitado y un honor estar en representación de la Federación Española de Municipios y Provincias en esta primera jornada de trabajo tras, como bien decías, la celebración de las elecciones europeas del 9 de junio. Yo, por naturaleza, soy una persona positiva. También soy una persona de retos. Es decir, yo creo que los resultados de las elecciones europeas se pueden valorar en un doble nivel. En primer lugar, si tenemos en cuenta la participación, si nos retrotraemos al año 2014, la participación ha crecido en una media aproximadamente de 9-10 puntos, ¿no? Lo cual quiere decir que la Europa de los ciudadanos como como gran eslogan o gran compromiso de la Unión Europea, pues se va consolidando. Los europeos votan más y votan porque creen que Europa es útil y que Europa pues responde a sus necesidades. Y en segundo lugar, creo que hay otro dato que es positivo, y es que es verdad que han tenido presencia como consecuencia de los resultados europeos los próximos gobiernos europeos de Europa, partidos populistas, extremistas, pero es verdad que hay una mayoría clara y contundente de los grupos políticos moderados, del Partido Popular, de los socialistas y, por supuesto, también de los liberales, que podemos conformar una mayoría clara de gobierno. A partir de ahí, creo que esta legislatura es una legislatura en la que tenemos que seguir trasladando la utilidad de Europa a los ciudadanos, que tenemos que abordar las cuestiones que son importantes y que afrontamos desde cada uno de los territorios, cuestiones como, evidentemente, los valores democráticos, pero también importantísimo todo lo que tiene que ver con la promoción de la igualdad, con el reto de que no haya diferencia entre los territorios urbanos y rurales, importantísimo también pues una política migratoria clara en la que defendamos al que llega, pero también protejamos al que está. Importantísima también pues otras políticas que afectan directamente a los ayuntamientos, para los que requerimos competencias y, por supuesto, financiación, y eso se habló el otro día en Coimbra. Por lo tanto, creo que el punto de partida no es malo, soy positiva, pero creo que tiene que ser pues una llamada de atención para que sigamos trabajando en esa buena senda que creo que se ha iniciado, y creo que ahora es nuestra responsabilidad, los partidos moderados, pues estar a la altura de lo que los europeos esperan de nosotros.
Thank you very much. María José, let's turn to Carola, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. Well, let's start by asking, what's in it for me? Because during the election campaign, I met people who said to me that they don't want to vote because they don't think it matters, and they think EU is irrelevant to them. So my first reflection on the EU election is that we must continue working with decentralization and show our citizens the advantages of our European cooperation. The fundamental grounds of the aim of the European Union is more relevant than in many years. Gender equality is going backwards, and while the extreme rights are increasing, women's rights are threatened. Polarization is increasing, and reports show that men and women tend to vote different. Men tend to vote more to the right, and women tend to vote more in the middle or to the left. Amongst young people, studies show that men think society is gender equal, and young women are worried about their future. Our contribution from the local level is that we need to shape the future of Europe where no one or no place is left behind. From the local level, we also need to put the light on what European Union means for European citizens, and we need to be concrete about the advantages of our cooperation. Municipalities and regions are important actors in the implementation of national, European and global goals. Therefore, we need to work for a multilateral system, a multilateral global system, and we must make the local voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Carola, and really my appreciation for bringing up the issue of gender equality and what this means for the big progress that we think we've made, but which is still rather patchy and on fragile ground. Thank you very much for that. Dusan, let's have your views.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for allowing me to participate in today's panel concerning the results of most recent European elections that were completed last week. And it seems that it is too early to speak about the outcome of the results, but I have to say that from the perspective of the Western Balkan countries, we really feel a bit released, since we were scared with the announcement that the far right and the populist parties are going to be even stronger after the elections. But after the results were presented, we felt a bit released. So it seems that our European perspective is still secured, but that also means that we still have plenty of things to do in front of us. The significance of the elections is that they shape the wide range of starting from the economic policies, social rights and international relationships. But it seems that the results are more or less the last warning that we received that we actually need to change something. By that I don't mean values. Values are still present. Values still need to be promoted in a proper way. So it means that we actually need to change something in the communication strategy. And that's why I really believe that local self-authorities and regional authorities are going to play the crucial role in the period that is about to come, because it seems that we didn't promote the European values that much to the citizens that actually should benefit from those values at most. So in order to fight against the so growing Euroscepticism and populism, we actually need to do more in order to promote European values and standards, not only on the territory of the Balkan countries that are actually moving forward. And the most recent results of the polls said that more than 70%, for example, in Montenegro, 75% of the people in Montenegro still believes that the future of a country is within the European Union. So that's the most powerful tool that we, the Balkan countries, are still having. The question is if we are communicating properly on the other European member states countries, if we are communicating properly the European values that are somehow threatened with the results of the most recent elections, European elections.
Dusan, can I have just a very quick follow-up? When you talked about communication strategy, you're referring to yours, or are you referring to the EU communication strategy on enlargement?
I'm referring to both, because it seems that so far all the messages that were sent from the local level that we actually need to play a crucial role, that we actually has to be perceived as a main stakeholder, were not taken into consideration seriously. So we are the ones that are communicating with the citizens every single day. So within those communications, we actually can promote European values. And that's something that we are doing at the Balkan countries. But I think that the future will actually shape something that are will of all the citizens from the Balkan area. And I really believe that after these elections, European Union actually needs a successful story. So it seems that we still did not recover from the Brexit, and that there is a successful stories within the Balkan countries. I really hope that Montenegro is going to be the most successful story like it is so far. And let us hope that by 28 we are going to be 28 member state of European Union.
Thank you. Thank you, Dusan. So turning now to you, Klaus Welle, we kept you late because we wanted to get your impressions of everything so far. And of course, you've been a participant in all of this for many, many decades, and also now taken a step back as a member of a think tank. So let's hear your views.
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, I've been actively participating for about 30 years. In '94, I was responsible to organize the election campaign of the CDU in Germany. So what are the key outcomes? First, the European People's Party has won the European election for the 6th time in a row, after before 20 years on the socialist side, but with an increased majority now of 54. This gives a very strong mandate, and I think that's why we see that things are accelerating, for Ursula von der Leyen as the lead candidate to become the president of the European Commission. There are some structural issues which deserve attention. The first is, for the very first time ever, if I see this correctly, there is no so-called progressive majority in the European Parliament. Progressive majority means Liberals, Socialists, Greens and Left Party together. That's not the standard case, but in 10 to 20% of the cases, especially on cultural issues, but also maybe on some very ambitious measures on environment, this was the majority. And for the very first time ever, that majority doesn't exist anymore. The four parties arrive at 307 seats, majority is 361, so it's far away from that. That means the possibility to impose their views is no longer there. Secondly, it's a very special situation because the EPP is not only strong in the Parliament, also strong in the European Council with 12 prime ministers, 4 socialists, 5 liberals, and the other ones are to the right, and therefore probably also in the European Commission. So I think that will have an impact on the policies of this Parliament. The right and extreme right, or let's say the very right and the extreme right, for the moment in the figures looks lower than in the prognosis, but it will still catch up because there are still more than 40 seats to be divided among others, and the experience is that most of these at the end of the day will land with parties to the right of the EPP, the right and the extreme right. So I think the final result will be extremely close to what you could read in Europe Elects and so on. But the very right and extreme right remains divided between those, especially in the ECR, who try to constructively engage with the system, those more in the ID group who are in fundamental opposition to the European Union, and those which haven't found any partners, which might even be considered to be on the racist right. What has not been very much reported is that there is now also the potential for a left populist group. The figures are there if you add the members of Madame Wagenknecht in Germany, a new party which immediately became double the size of the traditional left party, the Five Stars movement in Italy, and the 2 governing parties in Slovakia. I'm not saying we will see, but the figures are there to also create a left populist party in the European Parliament. So it's not something which is just limited to the right of the political spectrum. For the future, I think it's already clear that the centre will continue to work. The centre, I mean EPP, Socialist, Liberal, so centre-left, centre-right, centre. It will stabilize the system. Together they have about 400 seats in the European Parliament, which are absolutely fine for legislation. But my view is it's not enough for qualified majority. So for treaty change or for the election of the Commission President, it's not enough. And why is it not enough? Because cohesion is not 100%. Cohesion is maybe 90%, or sometimes it's 85%. And we know that, for example, on the election of the Commission President in the Liberal group, already Fianna Fáil has declared they wouldn't vote. ANO in Czech Republic have declared they wouldn't vote. The German Liberals are only voting if the combustion engine is reintroduced and if there's no next generation EU, but President Macron is exactly asking the opposite. So the three will not be sufficient. And that's why the question is on the table, who will come additionally? It's clear that the Greens would like to join that. They haven't voted the last 4 Commission presidents. If they wouldn't vote the 5th Commission president in a row, they might be considered to be rather on the anti-system party space, and they would risk the Green Deal in this legislature, and they would provoke that the system is moving further to the right. So there's a very strong incentive for the Greens to join that somehow, but they must do it with policy requests which are not making the majority lose more seats on the other side. I think it's also clear that those who will support the candidate in the European Council, the Prime Minister, that's especially Madame Meloni, and that's also the Prime Minister Fiala of the Czech Republic, if they support in the European Council, I don't see their members of European Parliament not support, which means there could be another 30 seats. That's not a coalition agreement, but it's a logic, it's following the logic of the party. Last word, my expectation for the key issues in the next legislature is A, defense, because of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, because of China, and because of the insecure relationship with the United States. Secondly, growth. That's why we have the Draghi, we'll get the Draghi report and Letta report, and the increased debt levels in our member states will not be sustainable without growth. So growth is a key issue, and growth without debt. 3, the budgetary pressures will be enormous. The Green Deal will probably demand 800 billion euros of investment. Not everything can come from national budget, not everything will be private. So the question will be, does it come from the European budget or from a special budget, and how much? Defense. We are now having huge problems with demography, which we are talking about, but now the situation is there. And if we are really serious on enlargement, and we see already the actions of Polish farmers on the Ukrainian border, I don't believe that we can do it with a budget of 1% of GDP. So the third issue is for me the budget, and the fourth is how do we complete the climate change agenda? But now maybe it's the more difficult part, because to decide an ambitious target is very easy, but to implement it in practice, to connect, let's say, the grid from renewable energies in Germany in the north, but to the industry in the south, it's very difficult, that's very costly, and therefore it's now coming to the test.
Klaus, thank you very much. Also, for a very realistic and I would say quite a sober view of what lies ahead, especially in terms of our priorities and how we ensure, we will talk about it, how we ensure that local authorities and regional governments become part of the discussion in a more forceful manner. Thank you very much. Now I would like Martin, please, to show us the results of the Slido. You've got the second question also on the screen. So we had asked, what is the top priority? And let us see the results of what we've had so far. Aha. I think this is a very good time to show this, because what we're seeing here, actually, Klaus, in a way, I'm not going to ask you to answer this now, is a little bit, if I may say so, in contradiction with our priorities, which are obviously defense, as you mentioned. So climate change, extremely important, renewables, reduce emissions, financing, of course, decentralized cooperation, defending democracy, And we're seeing promoting localism, equality being heard, and social justice. Thank you very much for that, Martin. Do we have the results already of the second question, which was what are the main challenges? That was the main challenges are climate change again. So this is obviously coming from a very strong place. And populism as a challenge, security and extremism and migration as challenges as well. The rise of the far right, high poverty, and economic decline coming in. And obviously democracy taking a very strong place there, as well as peace. Thank you very much indeed for your input. I think this gives us a lot of fuel for our conversation. Now, let's turn back and let's do a second round of questions. Maria Jose, I'm going to ask you the question. So you've seen the results coming up here, and also what we've heard across the table. So how do you see these recent elections impacting on local governments and municipal policies? All of these questions, how do they impact on your authority locally?
Bueno, teniendo en cuenta que lo normal es que se produzca pues una continuidad en la forma de gobierno y también en el fondo, por lo tanto, espero que desde ese punto de vista lo único que recibamos los ayuntamientos pues sea, en primer lugar, atención. Lo que tenemos que tener muy claro es que las políticas de Europa, las decisiones europeas, se aplican sobre los territorios y que el territorio más cercano al ciudadano es el ayuntamiento, es el municipio. Y, por lo tanto, si queremos demostrar que Europa es útil para los ciudadanos, yo creo que una administración útil es aquella que mejora la vida de la gente, pues necesitamos que Europa cuente más que nunca con los ayuntamientos, cuente con los gobiernos locales. En mi país, al menos en mi ciudad, Jerez de la Frontera, aplicamos el 90% de la normativa que se aprueba en Europa. Y, por lo tanto, necesitamos los ayuntamientos, ya no solamente los españoles, sino, como comentaba antes, el otro día también en Coimbra, conmemorando el 40 aniversario de Ayuntamientos Democráticos, también se habló. Creemos que es esencial que se cuente con los ayuntamientos desde el principio, es decir, desde el momento en que se comienza a redactar pues esas directivas, esas normativas que luego nosotros, al final, pues tenemos que aplicar como alcaldes. Cuestiones que creemos que hay que tratar. En primer lugar, bueno, pues se ha hablado aquí, se ha respondido por parte de todas las personas presentes, es evidente, pues el cambio climático, la transición tecnológica, la igualdad entre hombres y mujeres, las oportunidades para los jóvenes, que es esencial. Si queremos demostrar la utilidad de Europa, es necesario que Europa haga una apuesta fundamental por los jóvenes. Tenemos que trabajar para afrontar la soledad no deseada, es decir, el envejecimiento de la población y todas las personas mayores que viven solas sin querer vivir solas, o también los dependientes, la dependencia vinculada a la enfermedad. Es importante que hablemos también de los municipios más pequeños, pero es fundamental para todo eso, para poder afrontar todas esas políticas, no solamente quedarnos en hablar, en debatir, sino evidentemente en aprobar normativas, insisto, en las que se cuente con los ayuntamientos en su tramitación, pero luego fundamental también en la dotación de recursos para que podamos aplicarlas. Creemos que es esencial que haya una directiva europea que haya que transponer a los distintos países, que de alguna manera garantice la financiación para los distintos ayuntamientos, sean del país que sean, y creemos que es necesario bueno, pues que de una vez por todas también se aborde todas esas competencias que estamos ejerciendo en nuestros territorios sin que sean propias, es decir, las llamadas competencias impropias. Por lo tanto, creo, por terminar, que el próximo Gobierno europeo tiene el reto de ser más municipal que nunca, más municipalista que nunca. Creo que Europa tiene que pensar en clave de ayuntamiento. Se decide en Europa, pero las políticas se aplican en los ayuntamientos y hay que contar con nosotros, con los alcaldes y con las alcaldesas. Y, por otro lado, creo que es esencial que de lo que hablemos, que de lo que legislemos, no solamente sea importante para el gran debate político, sino que le toque a la gente directamente en sus vidas y mejore sus vidas. Y, por otro lado, que es esencial que para luego poder aplicar todo eso, pues tengamos la financiación necesaria para poder, insisto, aplicar las políticas. Es la única manera, insisto, de demostrar la utilidad de Europa y, sobre todo, la única manera en la que podemos los alcaldes y alcaldesas pues mejorar nuestros territorios, mejorar nuestras ciudades y, en definitiva, la suma de todas las ciudades somos Europa. Por lo tanto, mejorar Europa.
Thank you. That was very uplifting, so thank you very much for that. Carola, you are the CMR spokesman on international affairs, and so the question for you obviously is the outcomes of these European elections. How do you think they will impact on Europe's very valued soft power and generally relations on the international stage?
Thank you very much. The answer of the most important question for the local and regional governments was climate change. And all around the world, we are affected by severe global challenges. Climate change is one, environmental pollution, war and threats to peace and democracy, health crisis, discrimination, xenophobia, gender inequalities. The list is long, and of course the geopolitical situation is setting the scene, and it affects us all. In the European Union, even if, when we have listened to the results now from the elections, even if the political groups in the middle finds a way to continue their cooperation, we have a changing political setting with an increase of right-wing parties with nationalistic agendas. We have EU-critical parties and we have pro-Russian parties. Nations like Russia, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room. Nations like Russia use disinformation campaigns and cyber attacks to influence all levels of the society. And I think we must remember that this is a threat to our fundamental core of the European cooperation for peace and democracy. The extreme right parties' development in the European countries are worrying, especially when we talk about, as I mentioned earlier, gender equality. And my worries consider both female participation and gender issues. When violence are increasing in the world, gender-based violence are increasing even more. As long as women are killed just because they are women, we have a very long way to reach gender equality. And one must remember that gender equality is not a female issue. It's a question of human rights, and both women and men have to put gender equality and fighting gender-based violence in the center of our work. We need laws, we need policies, and we need implementation of gender mainstreaming. As we were speaking about yesterday, CMR is an important platform for improving the important work to strengthen women and girls' rights. The European Union must consider the effects of the changed geopolitical situation and what affects our citizens. The local level, as has been mentioned many times already in this debate, the local level is closest to the citizens, and we need to work with the perspective to influence the global level. And I think that CMR has an important role to play to influence both the European Union and the global arena through different actors like the UCLG and the United Nations. I think we need to focus on the challenges of implementing our global goals and need to put light on democracy and gender equality. From the local level, we need to put focus on building inclusive societies, and that must be our contribution to the European level, but also to the global level. So for me, the most important strategy in the European Union now is to recognize the importance of the local level and to find way for a real cooperation in all political issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carola. Carola, I just had a very quick follow-up for you on how your local and regional governments can actually, I guess, support the EU at an international level. Is this something that you are doing and you think you could do more of?
Yes, I think we are doing it and we can do it more, because when we are active from the local level on the international arena, we also bring forward our European values. And that's one important thing in the global discussion. And I think that when we take part in different activities in connection with United Nations and the different parts of the United Nations family, we can really bring forward those values that are so important for European Union and for our citizens. So I think we can do a lot, and I think that one must remember that the local level can do much more than we think about. Sometimes I think that we don't recognize the strength of the local level, but we are strong and we need to use this strength in all activities and in all arenas.
Thank you very much, Carola. Turning to you, Violeta Krudu. So you were quite optimistic when I asked you for your first response. So I was just wondering if you could give us your thoughts on Moldova's perspectives as a new EU candidate country and the future of the enlargement process.
Thank you. Dear friends, dear colleagues, I am delighted to represent Moldovan local authorities at this forum, which coincides with significant new opportunities for candidate countries. It is crucial to raise awareness about the challenges the Eastern Trio countries are currently facing. Not only must candidate countries integrate into the EU, but the EU must also be open to integrating these countries. In Moldova, local authorities are acutely aware of the strategic developments from European perspective. Local authorities have long been key promoters of European integration. We must prepare for the challenges ahead in the enlargement process. The European Committee of the Regions has estimated that 60–70% of EU legislation is relevant to local and regional governments in the EU. We understand the importance of this and are fully conscious of the extensive work ahead. We greatly appreciate Moldova's new role and status within the EU integration and pre-accession process. However, we lag behind other EU candidate countries regarding pre-accession funding instruments. While other candidate countries benefit from targeted pre-accession instruments, such as IPA or NPART or also, Moldova does not have access to these resources. This raises a crucial question. How can we fulfill pre-accession criteria and align with EU legislation without the targeted funding that was available to previous accession countries? Additionally, there is concern that EU pre-accession may merely be another PR instrument. We hope this issue will be addressed by the new EU Parliament and European Commission. Having the same status as other EU candidate countries is essential for political, administrative and financial progress towards EU pre-accession objectives. Coherent planning, programming, administrative and financial procedures are necessary for all EU candidate countries. Regarding the specific tools you asked about, I believe that partnerships with our peers and decentralized cooperation with local authorities across the European Union are vital for developing capacities and implementing effective policies at the local level. Beyond introducing appropriate national policies for local government, The key target at the local level is the consolidation of public services to implement focused EU pre-accession national strategies. Learning from European experiences, we will eventually create new models for public services. However, we face significant funding constraints. National and local resources have been severely strained by multiple crises. While international funding is primarily focused on crisis alleviation or minor interventions, which do not generate future development and investments but merely consume resources. Maintaining existing public services is becoming increasingly problematic, and infrastructure is deteriorating. From our perspective, one of the core criteria for the EU pre-accession policy should be investments in infrastructure, which are currently neglected in Moldova and many other candidate countries. The lack of investments also hampers the proper development of our public servants, as unmotivated people are less eager to learn. Additionally, I must highlight other urgent needs, such as local and regional capacity development concerning the EU pre-accession process, the acquis communautaire, fundraising and project preparation to effectively build and consolidate European practices and legislation in our country. To effectively utilize national and international funding, we must implement decentralized cooperation, twinning, and mutually beneficial partnership initiatives with European peers, as well as EU public procurement practices and principles. This will enable us to follow, assess, and influence EU policy making and the legislative process, and to voice our needs to relevant stakeholders and decision makers. I want to thank you for all your attention and for your support over the years at the level of CMR, Platforma, national associations, and certain local authorities from European countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Violeta. Dusan. So you gave us a kind of spotlighted a little bit already what your concerns were and what you thought could be done better. But I was thinking, as mayor of Montenegro, what do you think can be done to sort of speed up and make this more smooth? Violeta has given us some ideas. What are your ideas about the accession talks and the enlargement process more generally? Thank you.
Thank you. After the analysis of Mr. Vella, it is obvious that still there is plenty of things to do in order to shape the future of European Union within the European Parliament in next period. So it seems that there is also a lot of things to do for us, even though we actually believe that Ms. Ursula von der Leyen is going to be European Commissioner for the next period, and that the enlargement policy is going to remain the same and still be the top priority of European Commission. Montenegro is negotiating for more than 12 years, and so far we managed to open all the chapters, to provisionally close 3 ones, and the most recently we managed to receive a positive signals concerning the laws that were voted in the Montenegrin Parliament as a precondition to receive intermediate benchmarking assessment report, meaning that Montenegro is actually making the progress concerning the adoption to European standards and promotion of European values. When you ask me what should we do at the local level, we still need to continue with the promotion of European values. But we are also receiving the questions every single day from the citizens, even though they still believe the future of our country is Montenegro. What is the benefit they are actually going to receive? So in order to meet the expectations of the people, we actually need some means. By that I mean financial support that is not just provided throughout the DIPA mechanism, that was used properly because we managed to build the capacities. But also we are facing another challenge that you also mentioned. Demographics is something that really concerns us a lot. And the freedom to move to other countries is going to create a big problem for Montenegro. The skilled and knowledgeable people from the administration are actually moving to other job sites, and the ones that were dedicated to European part of Montenegro are trying to find another better solution for them. So we are losing that much needed capacity that we were building so far for many years. So it seems that we need to find the means to keep the knowledge, to keep the people that are experienced enough, to still promote European values and to provide a brighter future for Montenegro, and not only for Montenegro. By that I mean all the Balkan countries, that one successful story is going to be motivation for all the countries that are within some phase of enlargement process or started the negotiation or opening the chapters, that the future within the European Union is bright and provides security. But even the polls that we saw most recently means that the climate change is going to be probably the greatest challenge that we face so far. Knowing the fact that within the climate change we actually need to change the mindset of the people, and that requires a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of funds. So far, we are not in a position to even open the opportunities to find enough funds for even to meet the requirements of the Chapter 27 that is going to cost us a huge money within the country of Montenegro. There are some predictions that it's going to cost us 1 billion euros. So there is plenty of things to do, but we are more than ready, and we are willing to further proceed with the promotion and reaching the level of the quality of the life of European Union.
Thank you very much, Dusan, for that determination. I'm going to ask a question to Klaus, obviously, to give his points of view as well, but I'm going to open the floor. We have time for about 2 or 3 quick comments and quick questions from yourselves. I will take note of who's asking, but I will first ask a question to Klaus. So, Klaus, you've heard all the, let's say, the requests, what the local authorities, regional governments are really interested in, etc. So what advice would you give us? Give our audience here as well, in terms of the new setup in the European Parliament? How should local authorities and regional government approach this new mandate?
Yeah, I can say when I was still in function, I prepared both administrative and political agreements with the Committee of the Region and the Economic and Social Committee to work more closely together and to, let's say, pool our resources. But a key thing is still open for me. There is a lot of content knowledge on the local and regional level. But how does it arrive in practice to the decision makers in good time? And my view on this has been the same throughout the process. Basically, you need to target on 3 things. You need to make a decision on the proper content. You need to have it, you need to reflect timing, and you need a proper form. And when I speak about Parliament, I would say the moment where members of Parliament are most open for input is when the Commission has passed its annual work programme and there is legislation to come, which is amending legislation. So we had it already. Their experience from the local and regional level could be absolutely crucial, because you made experience with the existing legislation. So you probably have views what is working well and what is not working well. And if that could be, maybe also with the help of the Committee of the Regions, be put forward to lawmakers in the form of impact assessments. So this is a kind of local and regional impact assessment. How did the legislation in force work for us? What didn't work, and what do we want to see change? So if you manage to put it into this form and bring it forward in the right time when the rapporteur is thinking, where does he want to go to? And I'm sure you have the right content. I think that will make all the difference. But I would like to also add one other point, because we've been speaking here about communication. I think the key problem is that, and we've tried to work on this in the Parliament, that there is a lot of translation work necessary from European legislation to then how does it impact the citizen. And as Secretary General of the Parliament, I pushed a project, and you can see it was still used also in this election on the website. It's called What Europe Does for Me. And What Europe Does for Me was trying to do that translation work, including the locality. So if you are living in Split or living in Regensburg or living somewhere, what has been the impact of the European Union for you in precise terms? But also, how does the European Union impact you if you have a dog? Very important. British people have found out that they can't take their dogs anymore into holidays in the European Union. They have to go into quarantine. And what is the impact of the European Union if you're unemployed? And what is your impact, the impact of the European Union if you like football? So come from the very practical, everyday questions and experience, and do the translation work centrally, but disseminate it decentrally. And there's still too much communication about what have we been doing, but we need to think it from a citizen's perspective and do that translation work. So I can recommend that website if you haven't seen it yet, and I hope that it's helpful.
Indeed. Thank you very much for those very, very practical suggestions. So let's take a couple of questions and comments. I have a gentleman here. I'd also like to come back, and I have three people there, so you get the first. All right, the gentleman here, then Fabrizio, and then the lady at the back.
Hello, everyone. I'm Levan Abashidze, the newly elected spokesperson at Platforma from Georgia. I would like to thank everyone for organizing this event, and I'm going to have a short comment according to the results of the latest election in the European Union. I would like to thank authorities and the institutions of EU for the job they have done in the process of EU's enlargement so far. And taking into consideration the results of the recent elections, I hope that enlargement policy towards the Eastern Trio won't change. Furthermore, this process will become much more intense, and the representation of the local and regional governments, as well as their engagement level in this process, will be much higher than it was before. The local governments need more financing to achieve their goals, and I hope instrument for pre-accession will come into force in case of the Eastern Trio, which has not happened so far. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much for those comments. Fabrizio, please, Secretary General of CRM.
Thank you very much, Shada. And, well, I would like, first of all, to thank you all for the very interesting exchange and for sharing these very interesting insights with all of us. Thank you very much, Klaus. I think what I retain, I mean, you brought to the table many very interesting elements. One thing that I retain from your intervention is about the impact that this potential, the forming of the new majority within the European Parliament could potentially have in terms of political priorities. What the impact of this new majority, what's the impact that this could have on the policy that have been marking the European agenda in the last years, European Green Deal, defense, but also budget. So that was very interesting. Now, we are, of course, very eager and interested in understanding what the impact could be on local and regional governments in the future. It is very clear that in the last 50 years here in Europe, in Brussels, we made really some very important progress in highlighting the agenda of local and regional governments, strengthening multi-level governance. So we made some very good progress. Now, the future, of course, will depend on the majority of the European Parliament, but also on who will be sitting around the table at the European Council. It will depend also on the split of portfolios within the European Commissions. And in that sense, I'm not really sure we can also be that optimistic, let me say, because whatever the future will be, the trend that we have seen in the past is very clear. The more centralized, let me say, even autocratic a government is, the less keen that government is to open a dialogue with local and regional governments. So this is a trend that we've seen very clearly from the past. In this sense, I should say that, of course, I'm also a very optimistic person, but I think we have also some good reasons to be a bit concerned about our future and our relationship with the key decision maker at the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. Lady there.
Dear colleagues, I will speak in German, so if you need translation. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich bin hier Mitglied im CMA und auch Mitglied im Ausschuss der Regionen und vertrete den österreichischen Gemeindebund. Und wir haben uns auch sehr viele Gedanken gemacht, wie wir die Interessen der lokalen Vertretungen viel besser noch einbringen können, weil wir sehen, dass wir, und das hat der Kollege gesagt, oft sehr zu spät im Entscheidungsprozess mit drinnen sind und nicht auf der richtigen Ebene. Und auch Fabrizio hat es gerade gesagt, er ist nicht sehr optimistisch, dass wir da in Zukunft vorankommen werden. Und unsere Konklusion war, dass wir eigentlich versuchen sollten, auf Kommissionsebene einen Lokalkommissar oder eine Lokalkommissarin zu etablieren, um hier die Interessen direkt schon in der Kommission einbringen zu können. Und das wäre unser Standpunkt. Und wir haben das auch schon unserer österreichischen Bundesregierung mitgeteilt und auch unseren Mitgliedern des Europäischen Parlaments. Und ich bitte euch alle, dass ihr vielleicht auch in euren Nationen euch das unterstützen könntet, weil ich glaube, dass wir da einen direkten Zugang auch oben in der obersten Ebene haben sollten und natürlich auch unsere Intentionen hier von unten nach oben bringen können. Aber wie schon gesagt wurde, wir können noch viel mehr auf lokaler Ebene. Wir werden immer mehr betroffen. Das sehen wir alles in den Problemen, die wir jetzt gerade auch vom Podium gehört haben. Das geht von der Demografie bis zur Daseinsvorsorge. Wir werden immer mehr betroffen, aber wir müssen versuchen, rechtzeitig im Entscheidungsprozess dabei zu sein und nicht erst mit Abänderungsanträgen im Entscheidungsprozess sehr weit fortgeschritten.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to take one more comment or question from the floor. I have several coming up, but if you're quick, I have another 10 minutes. So if you're very, very quick with your points, I can give everyone the floor. So please.
Thank you. I shall be quick. Following on from what has been said, firstly, can I say how much I agree in relation to gender equality. I think that is going to be a fundamental weapon against the right moving forward, if I may. However, a couple of things strike me about what was said this morning. My bet is that looking around this room, most people here have a reading age, possibly in 2 or even 3 languages, of 21, 22, maybe even more. For most people in our communities, their reading ages will be between 8 and 10. And so if we are going to enable the European Union to grow its presence in our communities, the language has to be accessible. And I would ask, please, that instead of producing stuff which is just for us, we actually begin to produce things which are for our communities. The second issue is that I don't think has been really examined, and perhaps we need a completely separate event on this, is the influence of social media, because that does use accessible language and it is not properly controlled. Those medias, such as Facebook and X, Twitter X, they are the media that actually push forward ideas that influence ordinary people into voting the way they do. They should not be seen as platforms but as publishers. And the European Union ought to be taking serious action within its capabilities to stop them being considered as platforms and make them responsible for what is published. And the final thing, in relation to British dogs, please, if any of your countries are thinking about Brexit, and this is my personal view, please don't think about doing it yourselves. It is the most awful decision my country has made in the last 50 years. So please, make sure you stay in the European Union.
Thank you very much. And yes, advice taken. Also on social media, you did not mention TikTok, but I think TikTok has a lot of impact, especially on younger people. Gentleman over here.
Yes, thank you. I'm Andres Laisk from Estonian delegation. I, of course, I'm agreeing with most of things said out before, and for a very good discussion. I'm thanking you, especially Klaus Welle. Was very interesting to listen. Just trying to reflect from maybe Estonian perspective. First of all, we believe that defense and economy are clearly candidates for priorities. Measures should be taken to enforce the budget and support the growth. For example, agreed limits on loan levels and budget deficit should exclude defense loans. Then what we see from a local municipalities' perspective, the raising expenditures on defense of member states start to influence local municipalities, as budget and revenue cuts of municipalities are foreseen to finance defense costs. We are facing inability to hold the services level expected from us. Then I believe it's not only specific for Estonia, but ambitious plans on Green Deal and expenses connected to that creates stronger and stronger Euroscepticism. Explaining it to our inhabitants will be a great challenge. And finally, a lot told. I think it's a very serious point. I would like to emphasize that. Involvement of next generation, young people, is crucial. From a communication perspective, of course, using the appropriate channels, like social media also, and the messages. But also it is important to incorporate them essentially, value their participation in real processes. Yes, thank you. That's what 4 points I would point out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Points taken. I'm going to turn now to the panel. If you have any quick responses to what you've heard, please, you have a minute each to say so. And of course, I think, Klaus, you probably would want to come in and respond to a couple of things that have been said. So if Dusan, you want to go ahead?
Thank you for the comments. Coming back to the topic that I underlined during my speech is the communication. And to sum up these last two discussions, it seems that communication is a key, once again, but the proper communication. By that I mean that we should realize a lot or relies more on reliable resources, social media, and the freedom to speech that much loud within the social media is something that threatens us all. And we have to be aware of the fact that more than, for example, in Montenegro, 55 people that actually participate in the election campaign are with the education of high school. So we have to be aware of those things when making communication strategies.
Thank you very much, Dusan. If I could ask everyone to be quite short as well. So, yes, please. Carola, please.
Thank you. Well, what has came very clear to me is that this election has reminded us that we must fight for democracy, human rights, and peace every day. sometimes they think that these are values that are always being there and will be there forever, but that's not true. We need to fight for this every day, and that's my conclusion to this discussion. Thank you.
Very much, please. Please.
Sí, muchísimas gracias por darme la oportunidad de intervenir de nuevo. Gracias a todos los que han ofrecido sus puntos de vista y coincidir con mis compañeros de panel en la necesidad de que Europa siga trabajando en la defensa de los valores democráticos, que son los que han consolidado una Europa fuerte y creo que cada vez más próspera, que creo que es esencial defender la igualdad de los derechos entre hombres y mujeres y, por supuesto, también el arraigo a los territorios, que en mi país es fundamental. Y luego creo que es importante la otra conclusión que me llevo, y agradezco a Klaus también su intervención, el hecho de que la voz de los ayuntamientos se escuche clara y firme en relación con los asuntos que nos preocupan a la hora de que Europa tome decisiones que nos afectan directamente y, por lo tanto, afectan a los ciudadanos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Greta?
I will finish maybe with a joke. We, in Moldova, we are about 900 mayors regarding communication, that it's very, very important. And we had a meeting with a minister. I told this joke before, but it's very important for us. We had a meeting, and at this meeting, one of our ministers told us, you know, I have in my phone 200 telephone numbers of mayors in Moldova. And we said, yes, but we are 900. How you speak with all of us? So my conclusion is that we need this kind of discussion of communication institutionalized between CALM, Congress of Local Authorities, and the other levels, central or European or parliamentarian. Thank you.
Thank you. Klaus?
Yes, maybe just 4 short remarks on the question of the extreme right, because I've been working on this with the Martin Center recently. I think there are 4 drivers. A, social media reward more extreme positions. If you say on the one side, on the other side, you will not develop a very big following. Secondly, when we say extreme right, we might be missing that very often there are important social issues behind. If I look at the AfD 2021 German elections, overrepresented with workers, overrepresented with the unemployed. So very often they have become the Workers' Party, and the Social Democrats are no longer. 3, the important cultural issues. There is a clear city-countryside divide. You look at the map of France, everything is Le Pen except the big cities. So that means, how do decision makers also take into account the countryside? And the 4th issue, and I think it's absolutely clear, there is foreign interference as well. If you read the book of Catherine Belton about Putin's people, you know that Russia has moved not millions, billions abroad for these kind of purposes, and they will end up somewhere.
Thank you, Klaus, for those very sobering remarks. So thank you to all of you for, I have to say, a very, very insightful discussion. I'm going to end by just saying what I say to my students at the College of Europe, which is that we all have very hard work ahead. So I know summer is there and we all need to relax, but I think this summer is going to be quite an active summer politically also, and where we will have to do some of our homework as coalitions are formed and unformed and reformed, as new leaders are appointed, as new parliamentarians come and take their seats. We saw the political priorities, and I think this is quite fascinating, and I have to say thank you to all of you for putting that so clearly out there on Slido. Climate change, sustainable development, peace, security are your key priorities, and I think, Klaus, you probably agree with me that this is going to be the challenge for the new European Parliament and for the new European Commission to reconcile what people really, really demand and want, and to make sure that the implementation that you referred to is kept in line with the values that our Europeans want. I think what's very, very important also is to make sure we've seen a turnout that was relatively reassuring. Let's see, for these parliaments, relatively reassuring, not that bad. We've seen a result that we say, some of us have said, is a relief. Some of us say it as a glass half empty, that lots has to be done to actually struggle for and conserve our values. But there is we should not widen the disconnect between citizens and our leaders. And I think that's where it is so important, the work that you are doing, is to bring the citizens' voice, the local voice, the regional voice, into our conversations here in Brussels and in capitals that tend to be very national state focused, European state focused. So I think your voices are going to be very important. So with that, I'd like to bring this fascinating conversation to an end and to wish you a happy summer and wish you also hard work ahead. Thank you very much. Some housekeeping to give you as well, and I'm not doing my job as a moderator if I don't give it to you. So can you help me, Shahaya?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. So in terms of housekeeping, we will have now a coffee break of about 20 minutes, and then we divide up between our CMR members and our Platforma members for 2 parallel sessions. One of the sessions for cohesion policy will remain here in this room, and the other one for our Platforma members will be in JDE 53, which is just at the end of the corridor down there, and we will be there to assist you to find it. So that's just a reminder. Platforma on the left at the end of the corridor, and everybody else stays here. Thank you.